Well, now that we've finally reached that frost-free date for our area, which is about April 15th around Stillwater, you're probably ready to go out and plant all those 10 annuals. Well, if you live in the south part of the state, it's okay to start doing that. But if you live in the north part of the state, you might want to hold off just another week or maybe 2 weeks longer to miss out on that last freeze that might nip you. Well, if you're out looking for transplants, I want to give you a few tips on what to look for in a good transplant. Well, first of all, check the plants out for insects. Now here I've got a little perennial, and you'll notice that it's just covered with aphids. Now you want to look really closely when you're buying transplants and look for things like aphids. And a good place to look is on the underside of the leaves, because a lot of them like to hide under there. Well, another culprit in the insect world are spider mites, and a lot of transplants will have those sometimes. Here I have a butterfly bush, and you'll notice this stippling effect on the top of the bush. This is a classic symptom of spider mites, and if you look underneath, you'll see a lot of little dust-like particles and sometimes some little red particles. Those are actually the spider mites. And so if you find plants with insects on them, be sure and leave those alone. You don't want to take those insects to your garden. Well, also you want to check and make sure that the plants are disease-free. And a good place to look is to look down at the base of the plant and also check the color of the leaves and make sure they're a nice, healthy green color. Now, something else that you'll want to do when you're buying plants is check and make sure that they're not overgrown. If you pull these plants out and the roots are just everywhere, you don't want to get those plants, because this transplanting shock that these will go into when you put them in the ground is going to set them back. And if you've got a plant that's just right, then you'll be better off. Now here I've got some lobelia, and they are in a little bit better shape. You'll notice the roots are just now coming down. They're just circling a little bit at the bottom, but not much. And also, when you look at the roots, look for some nice white healthy roots. These are very nice. You don't see a lot of brown roots in there. And so that's a good healthy plant to plant. Now, with some of our vegetable crops like tomatoes, there's something else that you want to look for on those. Now, of course, these don't look like prime specimens. The leaves are kind of yellow, and they're also starting to curl, so you wouldn't want to get those, even though you'll notice they have good strong stems. But also on these tomatoes, they're already starting to bloom. Now, if you can, try and find tomato transplants that aren't blooming yet, especially if they're in a small 6-pack like this. If you're getting larger tomatoes, like in gallon-sized containers, then it's okay if they're starting to bloom, because they've got a lot more room to grow there. Now, I've also got some tomatoes here that haven't been treated very well. They've been kind of abused, so you'll want to avoid those. And also, you'll notice here, they have very weak stems, so those aren't something that you're going to want to plant in your garden. Now, I told you about plants that were too far along, but you can also get plants that are too young to set out yet. And with these tomatoes, if I pull these out, you'll notice they haven't quite filled the entire space with roots yet. So these aren't quite old enough to transplant out yet. So you'll want to look for some that are a little bit bigger than this. Now here, I have some tomatoes that are actually just about the right stage to go out in the garden. They've got a nice strong stem, they have healthy green leaves, but they're not starting to bloom yet. And if I pull them out here, they've got a nice root system, but it hasn't just entirely filled the whole cell pack yet. And so these plants are ready to go. Well, we're putting some tomatoes out in our raised beds this year, and we actually have kind of a tomato buffet going here. And we're going to plant some red currant tomatoes, as well as a pineapple tomato and a garden peach tomato from Nichols Seeds. We're also going to plant an 1884 strawberry wedge, a persimmon, a pink brandywine, and a green zebra tomato that have all been given to us by Daryl Merrill. Well, to get started, we're going to go ahead and put our red currant tomato in. And when planting tomatoes, the important thing to remember is have a well-amended soil and have it well drained, and also plant your tomatoes in a spot where they're going to receive at least 6 hours of sun a day. Now you just need to dig a hole down, and when you're planting your tomato, actually plant the tomato deeper. You can take some of these lower leaves off and plant it deeper up on the stem here, because they're actually going to root out the sides of the stem, and this is going to give you a little bit more strength in that tomato stem if you plant it that way. Now you can't plant all plants this way, but tomatoes are great about planting them like this. Now fill it in partially and then give it a little bit of drink of water. Let that soak in. And then just continue to fill in the soil around the base of that.
We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. You can also find more recent videos on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.